we're your co-host Tina,
And I'm Shuhan.
and welcome back to an episode of the Women in Tech Tea Podcast. In this episode, we have our wonderful guest speaker with us here today, Dalis, who is currently a software engineer at Google and an NUS alumni. And you have also previously been a part of our Human Library events, which are just the sessions we hold where we invite speakers to connect with female students at NUS School of Computing. So without further ado, Dalis, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and some of the work you're currently doing?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Tina and Shuhan, for having me here. And it's really lovely to be here. And I think this podcast initiative is super cool because, I'm all about like connecting students to more people in the industry. And I think it's really great. So my name is Dalis. I'm an NUS alumni. I graduated NUS in 2022 with a degree in computer science. And after graduation, I joined Google as a software engineer. So I've been at Google for about 1.5 years now. So I'm still like relatively new to like working life and all that. And at Google, I'm working on Google Search and basically building features for Google Search to drive more traffic into Google Search. Also at Google, I'm pretty involved in like community events. I was a co-lead of Google Women in Engineering. The shortcut to that, I'll refer to it as GUI from now on because it's quite a long name. And yeah, so we do a few things in GUI, but what I'm doing is more of the community side. So I actually took inspiration from your event, the Human Library, and we're gonna do a Human Library with NUS Women in Tech, where the Googlers are gonna be the books, and we're doing that in April. So that's really awesome how we can cross collaborate. So really happy to be here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. Women in Tech is also a relatively new initiative at NUS to promote support for women in the tech industry. We're so happy to have had you at the Human Library last year. So we're gonna jump into some questions about your educational journey. So first, as an NUS undergrad, what was your university experience like? Like, what aspects of personal growth and development did you go through in your uni years?
So I think my uni years was probably like a lot of you, just rushing from one lecture to another and struggling through like these weird concepts of linear algebra, discrete maths, data structures and algorithms, and having lack of sleep and all that, and having study groups, helping each other through exams and tutorials. So, and I really actually enjoyed the challenge. It was tough, but I really enjoyed the abstraction and the challenge. And other than like the core CS stuff, two other things that I think defined my uni life was being at Tembusu College and having a little stint in NUS Overseas Colleges, also known as NOC. So from Tembusu College, I got to take a lot of interesting modules that are completely different from computer science. So modules that are touching on like politics and philosophy. And it was pretty refreshing to have like a break from all the math, I guess. Yeah, and I think it's also given me a really deep appreciation of interdisciplinary knowledge, because even though you're gonna professionally grow as a computer scientist, you still have like a life in the actual world. So I think it's really important to appreciate the humanities. So that's a really big takeaway for me from my uni life. And yeah, the other thing I mentioned was NOC. So as part of NOC, I was very lucky to get my first like real internship through NOC after my first year. And I was posted in a startup, and I got to, learn. It's like I get two things at once, right? I got to be in a different country, learn a new culture, and like really have fun with friends. And also I got to build on my technical skills and work in an actual work environment for a little bit. So that was really nice. It ultimately it helped me figure out what I want to do in my career as well.
So as you mentioned, like you went on the LC journey. So I bet any students who are interested in this program are curious about that. But for those who aren't really familiar, can you just briefly introduce what ALC is and probably share more details on like the places you went to and your takeaways from the program?
Yeah, okay. NOC's like core value is it's all about entrepreneurship, and NUS wants to expose students through entrepreneurship. And I say the word expose, meaning they're not forcing you into entrepreneurship. They're not making you do a startup. So for example, I would say they expose you in three ways. So one way is that for most of the NOC programs, you have to go through a module about entrepreneurship. So you learn the theory behind it. And then the second way is actually posting you in a startup and a startup environment, getting you to go to events about startups and all that. So that's really big exposure. And another way is that if you do choose to do your own startup, and if you qualify, you can get funding from NOC. So I think it's a really cool way to practically teach you entrepreneurship. And so NOC has different, well, back then, I don't know about now, but they had different programs of different lengths and locations to suit your needs. So they had like a 3-month program in, they called it NOC Southeast Asia. That was 3 months when I applied. And then they have 6-month programs, and then they have year-long programs. So I spent my first university summer in a city called Bandung in Indonesia. And we were in like an incubator space. It's called Block 71, if maybe some students are familiar with that. Being in an incubator space meant I got to network with other entrepreneurs as well in that space. And I got a pretty good glimpse of how startups are run. When you're in a small startup, you work very closely with like the CEO and CTO. So you also get a good idea of what like their day in the life is like. And of course, for me, I was in a technical role. You don't have to be in a technical role. You can be in like a business marketing strategy role as well. Yeah, so for me, I picked up a few frameworks, and I did build a few features. So that was a really big learning for me as a first year student with no prior experience. I think it's a really rare opportunity that as a university student, you can actually dabble into entrepreneurship. There's virtually no strings attached. So if you have the chance to, I would really encourage that you apply for this NOC program. It's quite special. My key takeaways from it would be you always hear about how a startup is run, and you always see the word entrepreneur and startup and founder. They're like buzzwords on LinkedIn and people you talk to. But when you actually go on NOC, you really see what that life is like. There are like upsides and downsides to it. And then you can really see for yourself whether you want to pursue entrepreneurship. For me, I thought I would like to pursue entrepreneurship, but going through the NOC program, it actually changed my mind, and I want to pursue like big tech companies instead. But everybody's journey is different. I have friends who have been very successful through NOC in their entrepreneurship journeys.
Wow, that's really amazing. Okay, I hand over the time to Tina.
That's quite interesting, like how you navigated the professional landscape so early on in your career. And talking about like transitioning from internships to early career, how have your diverse experiences in the internships that you did across various industries, including startups, like, and also big tech and banking as well, have shaped your career aspirations? How did you decide to make the transitions?
Yeah, I think this is a good segue for me to elaborate more on my last part about how I said that, through NOC, I actually realized I don't want to do entrepreneurship. One of the reasons why I tried to start so early on to do different things, like different internships in different industries, is because I had no clue what I wanted to do. I came into this degree because of an interest in science, and the subject looked interesting, but I actually had no idea what it's like in industry. So I tried to just grab opportunities to work at different types of companies. So I worked in like very small startups with just a handful of full-time employees. I've worked in the banking industry as well at GIC, which is the investment arm of Singapore's sovereign fund. And I worked in Google. So these are internships. So they're really quite different companies. So after all these experiences, I have narrowed down my dimensions of work that are important to me. So the most important of it is engineering practices. And what I realized is that your company's engineering practices depends on how many people you have in the company, specifically how many engineers you have and who you're building for. So the fewer engineers that you have, the less code readability you need, because you can just talk to each other. You can do pair programming, to explain to each other your code. Whereas the more engineers you have, the more code readability that you need, because your code can potentially live on to be read by thousands of other people. And when I say code readability, it doesn't mean the best or most optimized algorithm. Sometimes the best algorithm is actually hard to read, and sometimes you want to, if you don't need the best performance, you sometimes want to write a more readable, simpler code. And then other engineering practices would be like when you implement a certain feature, there are multiple ways to do it, and they all have different drawbacks. So how you choose your drawbacks, or if you want to cut corners, that depends on who you're building for. If you're just building for investors or just a small number of people, you just want something to work quickly. If you already have a stable product with millions of users, like Google, for example, you don't want to break things because you don't want to break things for your users. And usually engineering practices is a trade-off between that and code velocity. So you do learn a lot more at a startup. You do so many things, but then you don't get to work on more bigger scale things or things like infrastructure work. Whereas at Google, you get to work on optimization problems, but then you do work slower. You know, you just ship less as a developer. It's just a trade-off. It's inevitable. The second dimension to me is career growth potential. So at a startup, you have really high career growth potential. If the startup does well and you're one of the first to be in it, you'll basically end up knowing everything about the tech and you're going to be super important. But that is if the startup is successful. You do take a bit of a gamble because statistically, startups, most of them fail. And for like bigger established companies, it depends on your industry. So like in the banking industry, you kind of are like guaranteed like a progression after certain years. So after 2 years, you actually get a different title and job scope. It's kind of like very structured, the ladder. For tech industry, there is some sort of an average tenure, but that can vary based on your performance. So if you want to strive really hard, you could get promoted faster and all that. Yeah, and I think the third dimension, I would say, is company culture. This one I can't really classify. It just depends on the company, I think, in my limited experience. So when you do go for interviews with companies, just ask the interviewers what they think the culture is like. When I was interviewing, one of my favorite questions to ask was, what is your most and least favorite thing about your workplace? And you get them to elaborate on their answers, and then you get a good sense of what that workplace is like. So after going through all these experiences, I decided that I want to prioritize best engineering practices because I have done like small feature rapid development in uni already. So I want to know what it's like to build at scale. And that's why I chose Google. So engineering practices was the most important one to me.
That's a really interesting choices you made along the way, and like starting from not knowing much about the industry to like gathering the experience, then forming your objectives. That's quite, I think, insightful to current students as well. Maybe then a question we also had are like, what are some current industry trends that students should be aware of?
I think everyone should be and probably are aware of generative AI. There's been an explosion of chatbots, chat GPTs and Gemini, Bard. So underlying this tech is called LLMs, but you can call them generative AI. But I think we shouldn't just pigeonhole ourselves into just generative AI. I think AI is a really powerful trend right now, and there are other industry trends such as automation, like robotics, self-driving cars, VR, AR, and underlying tech to that is actually machine learning and AI as well. And so I would encourage everybody to look into AI a little bit, like gain an understanding of it. If you're an undergraduate in uni, you're not gonna have time. You're not gonna have the bandwidth to be like an expert in AI, but I think you will have the bandwidth to just learn a bit of the foundational knowledge. There is a module in school, Introduction to AI. I think it's a pretty good module. It has a good breadth. And if you don't have the bandwidth for that module, then you can seek learning yourself online. I think it's going to be really important when you enter industry because you'll start to notice a lot of things are related to AI, or a lot of companies are trying to incorporate AI more into their products. And with that, also learn a bit about the ethics of AI and the reliability of AI, because as technologists, you may understand the AI, but for laymen, for lay people who you're building for, they might view it completely differently. So it's a really interesting space, and I would encourage everyone to just if you don't have an intention to be an expert in it, but at least learn a bit about the foundations of AI.
Yeah, there is a current compulsory module for computing students for
Oh,
AI.
is it compulsory?
Yeah, it is.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. When I was there, it wasn't compulsory, I think.
At this point, maybe I can hand back over to Shuhan.
Okay, so thank you so much for the advice and insights into the industry trend. And so now we're wondering, like, what challenges did you face when transitioning from internships to your full-time jobs, and what insights you gained from this? What are some things that you wish you had known earlier, like before making the transition?
Challenges in transitioning from internship to full-time job. I guess one of the challenges is that fear of not securing a full-time job. And it's very difficult. You go through many interviews, rejections, you feel very dejected. But in terms of the day-to-day internship to the full-time, at least in my personal experience, it wasn't very different because the internship was built in a way that your role would be pretty much what your role would be like at full-time work. So in that sense, having an internship in a company that you're interested in is also a really good way for you to like kind of see whether you like that company, because that's how you're going to work. The way that they treat you would be kind of the same as the way they treat full-timers. And then once I got into like full-time work, something different would be like your lifestyle. So at school, you have curriculums, you have professors telling you what you want to look out for, what are the industry trends, for example. You have people guiding you and mentoring you all the time. At work, none of that happens anymore. I mean, you can get a work mentor, but your day is determined by how you want to structure it. And then it's actually a challenge for me to take time to do my own learning, to sort out my priorities versus career and versus life. So, for example, now I'm trying to read more about tech news, and it's kind of hard for me to just like go, oh, what do I read about? No one's telling me what I should read about. So I subscribe to this newsletter called TLDR. I got an ad on Instagram about it. It's pretty nice, so you can check it out. Some things I wish I had known earlier. Yeah, on a lighter note, I wish I had known that working life is actually great. When I was in uni and I talked to like older people, they would always, they come to me and they're like, oh, I really miss uni. I wish I was back in uni. And I would think, oh, is working life that bad? I feel so stressed at uni now. How much worse can it get? So I felt pretty like intimidating going into this working life as an adult, paying taxes, paying rent and all that. But actually I find that it's nice. I really like it because you do get more time to yourself, and then it's a new set of challenges. So I do hope you all are looking forward to graduating and pursuing, I don't know, further studies or jobs. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
things will get better for sure. I wish I knew that. I'll be happier.
Okay, I guess we're all looking forward to stepping into the work life now. Okay, so as we know, like you graduated in 2022, which is still like the COVID time. So like entering the industry during the periods of layoffs as junior, would you like to share about the emotional impact that it had on you when you navigate through this tough time?
I guess I also knew that we were gonna face all these layoffs. Yeah, but you don't know, you can't predict it. So it was really tough because as a junior, you feel so replaceable. You have so much to learn and you feel like anyone can replace you. You have a cohort of 400 or 500 people that can be in the same position as you. And the layoff started when I was just about 5 months into my job, and it was my first job. And I got a really good job. And as you know, Google is very competitive. So at that point, it kind of became like an identity as well. Like it's hard to distance yourself from your work. You're just in this high, oh, I got a really great job, I love my work, and then oh, this can be taken away from you and you have no control over it. So I was super stressed like 24/7 for a few weeks because they announced that there was going to be layoffs, but then we didn't know when it was going to happen. But thankfully, I had a lot of emotional support my co-workers and I, we just talk through it a lot, and there's a lot of people going through the same thing, so you do really feel heard, you feel understood. And I'm not gonna lie, it was hard, but I think eventually I kind of like got over it, I guess. I realized there are things you can't control, and if you mull over it, it has no net positive in your life. And the only thing you can do now is to do your best, right? Just do your best every day. And then if you do get laid off, then the only thing you can do is also do your best and go back to interview practices, find a new job. And I survived the layoff by some sort of luck, so fingers crossed. That being said, it's very normal to feel anxiety about all this. I still feel like anxiety sometimes. But then I just have to remind myself, oh, well, what can I do? It's the industry trend, and it's going to go up and down. So we're at kind of rock bottom right now in the industry. So it's going to get better. That's a good thing. Yeah, to look forward to.
Yeah, I guess like keeping a positive mindset is very important. And yeah, just keep trying doing your own thing and the support is also very important. Now I guess Tina will ask some questions about some empowering questions.
So earlier you mentioned about how being a part of GWE, you're first a co-lead and now your position has changed, I think. So we just wanted to ask if you have questions about the roles that you had in this organization, and what are some outreach events that you organized, and what drives you to volunteer your time for these initiatives?
Yeah, so last year I was a co-lead of GWE. So GWE had a few leads, and so for my scope, it was more on the community outreach side. And yeah, to put it generically, we were giving students from schools, JCs, university, an opportunity to come into Google and just interact with Googlers. So this could be in the form of like tech talks or fireside chats with what a Googler life is like, and office tours and all that. And our requirement was that our audience would have to be a majority of females. We gave them a ballpark of like 70%. And the reason for that is because we're in the GUI group, we're not in the outreach group. We don't have bandwidth for that. So these events mostly came as external requests because we built connections over the years with the past GUI leads. And then some people want to make more events for their students, for example. But last year we did have one initiative, like our own initiative, which was a fireside chat with women Googlers. So we invited about 100 secondary and JC school students. So we wanted to target the high school group, and they would just sit down and have like chit chats with Googlers. Yeah, and the work is very time consuming because we are volunteering on this on top of our software engineering jobs. And I have to spend a lot of time preparing the event and liaising with external organizations. And then on the day of the hosting the event itself on the day is also time consuming. But despite that, I really, really enjoy giving back to the community. And I kind of feel like I feel like an obligation, like some small innate obligation. And the reason is that I am also from an underrepresented background in tech. So, being female, and I'm actually from Cambodia. And that's a country that many people know to be lesser developed. And when I reflect on the society that I was brought in, I feel very lucky to be where I am today. And even though I know I worked hard to be here, but I've also been lucky. I've had serendipity in meeting different people from the tech industry and connecting with them when I was in uni. They gave me lots of advice, guidance, and inspiration, to go into where they were. And I just want to give this back as well, to have that opportunity with GUI. Yeah, I'm just hoping to pass some of these serendipities along, Yeah, that's my motivation.
That's quite interesting. So, in your experience, then, what are some effective strategies you've seen or implemented that have helped foster a more inclusive workplace, like empowering more underrepresented groups in STEM fields, or just championing gender diversity? Or maybe what are some changes you would like to see as well?
Okay. So in my experience, in a very informal capacity, right? Because we were not in a role where we could like speak formally about our organization's DI strategies or anything. So in my experience with organizing these small events, I just found connection to be very important. So just circling back to that fireside chat with about 100 students that I mentioned. Yeah, let me just get into that a bit more. So we had a lot of students, and they were like 90 of them were female, so vast majority female. They were young, they were like 15, 16, 17 at most. And we had an hour where there's a panelist of 4 speakers, all women Googlers, not just in tech, but in as a product manager as well. So they were talking about their career journeys. And after that, we got in a total of 10 Googlers to just speak with them in small groups, just like a chit-chatting, free chit-chatting hour. And then I had students coming up to me telling me things that I was so surprised by. They were like, "Oh, in my class, all the computer science people in my class are male, and when they elect class presidents or class leads, they're all males, and I feel like we have no voice." Or they say things like, "I feel like in my math class, or computer science class, the guys are so much smarter than the girls because somehow they started coding since they were like 8 or 9, and I can't understand how that happened, and I feel so behind." And then the really touching thing is they told me, "Oh, coming here, I feel like so encouraged to keep doing this because I honestly feel like maybe in JC I will stop doing computer science because I feel like I'm not really fit for it." But they said that seeing that there are women in tech like they're real, they're not unicorns, and there's a lot of them. They feel much more inspired to keep doing what they're doing. So in my capacity, I saw that as pretty effective, just to get younger people to be more exposed to industry and to see that women in tech exist, and there are a lot of us now. It's like, yeah, the gender imbalance is there, but the gender imbalance seemed to be more prominent in schools. So when I was in uni, I also felt like a big gender gap. But then once you go through industry, and it trickles and it gets better. So I would really like to see schools doing more programs to just expose students into industry. When I was in school, I thought that was the most helpful when I could talk to people in industry. Yeah, so some the things that you are doing, it's really great to help people in NUS.
Thanks so much. It's so heartwarming that like the students find like seeing actual women in tech so inspiring. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention we have like June jams in June where we're inviting like students from secondary 2 and 3 to come down and have like workshop kind of thing. So I think your insights will really resonate with us while we're hosting that event.
Yeah, I think that's so nice that you're not only focusing on getting NUS exposed to industry, but also the other way around. I think that's super important because the things that the students told me, I was really surprised. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you all felt so strongly about this." So yeah, your programs will definitely help them along the way. You won't see the effect immediately, like they're not going to turn up at your office the next day, they're 15, but like these effects really compound and multiply. I mean, for me, it really did with my personal experience. Yeah.
It's so true. I'll hand back to Shuhan now for wrapping up this podcast episode, unfortunately.
Yeah. So before we actually wrap up, would you like to give a closing word or just a final piece of advice to both the young men and women pursuing tech out there or who are aspiring to follow a similar career path as you? Like, yeah.
I think for young people, a common theme is that we don't know what we want to do. And then for me, and I think a lot of my peers, when we came into computer science, we narrowed down that, okay, we want to do a computer science degree. And then within that sphere, you still don't know what you want to do because tech is actually so big. There's so many things in tech. I was really overwhelmed when I came in. I thought it was just, oh, you're just gonna code. You're just gonna write code in a few lines, but there's so many different aspects of tech. So I would really encourage you to just step out of your comfort zone and try different things. You can try and set a practical goal. Maybe in one semester you do something new. So in one semester you do a hackathon on a different theme. or in another semester you join a conference, or in another semester you can set a goal to reach out to 5 people in industry and talk to them. Just be brave and do things that are really uncomfortable, because now is the time for you to explore. If you fail at things in uni, it's fine. Like, I don't mean fail modules. I mean, if you like do a hackathon and then you don't get first place or whatever, it's fine. It's all there for you to try. If you want to try NOC, try NOC as well. And it's really important to just talk to a lot of people, because when you talk to people, you know what's out there. And that's going to really help you when you graduate. And you have to decide which industry, what type of company you want to work for. Because honestly, there's a huge range and there's no one size fits all in the tech industry. So go out there, try things.
Yeah, thank you for the helpful advice. And personally, I feel so benefited from our talking and sharing today. Yeah, because I was like, the overwhelming feelings for undergraduates, like how you're navigating your career path and all the stuff. So that would be all about the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Dallas, for your time and valuable insights. I hope you have fun talking and sharing valuable advice with everyone listening in. I'm also sure our listeners will gain some great lessons from your sharing. And with that, we'll see you in our next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.